the higher return they're going to get, obviously, in a prospect. Now, let's go to the other side, because I know we're talking about sending out, and I think both of those guys go. I've seen some of the trades that the Indians have been rumored to be in. The one name that does intrigue me a little bit, especially I
want to see if you're going to say the name that I'm like coming to the table with. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's just something I saw, and I'm like, hey, I could be in that. Especially you just talked about sending salary out. Just as Drupal alone, it's pretty much a match, the salary you send out, and I don't mean a trade for this guy, but I'm talking about Indians' finances. You wouldn't be bringing much back in. Next year, it's a higher salary. Alex Rios with the Rangers. The fact that he's not hitting for power doesn't change the fact that he still has a bat and he's an outfielder. And we also are stuck with Ryan Rayburn, by the way, for another year. But do you think in any way, because there's another year attached to a name like that, that's the only kind of deal I can see the Indians pulling off, is a guy like that comes with this year and another year. And that's not the most ridiculous salary when you realize what we pay some other guys.
I agree with you in that if the Indians in some way add a part, it's not just going to be for this year. I will be on here for as much as I talk about retooling. I will be on here and livid next week if they traded for a guy whose contract expired in 2014. Yes. I mean, at this point, I just think that's crazy, and that's not their way. I mean, that's not the way they've operated at the deadline in the past. So I would be stunned to see that. Rios is not a guy that I like for a couple of reasons, Jerry, and I'll give you the added, he's still hitting, but obviously the power loss. But the other thing is, defensively, this team is old and poor defensively, and is adding him is only making them slower. And from a financial standpoint,
how big of a liability is? I'm not hip to him defensively. Obviously, I don't follow him every day.
And I mean, I think as you go to the winter, and if you start to have an eye towards 2015, I mean, I just think you have to make efforts to improve pitching and defense. And I'm not sure that he does both. I don't know that he definitely doesn't do both because he doesn't pitch, but I don't think he makes them better defensively. And the other thing, it sounds like they wouldn't be taking on money, but I hate to say it, I think they would be, because anybody that tells you that the door has been open to Asdrubal Cabrera coming back is probably not telling you the truth, because I think they have known for at least a year and probably had an eye longer than that when his contract expired, he would not be re-signed and that money would be, allocated somewhere else. And the other reason, to go with that is, I mean, I'll give you and anybody listening the challenge. If you've never been to this website, just go to Google and type in Cops baseball contracts, and every contract of every player and their incentives and what they make every year, it's all listed there. And I have, in probably the last, 5 to 7 years, I have never seen a mistake on that site. How they get every trinket of information, I don't know. It's been taken over the years by Baseball Prospectus. I have watched many quality writers in the Indians press box during games refer to it as scripture. So it's the website and try to put together 2015 on about an $80 to $85 million budget, and it's going to be tough. And so taking on Rios and that $12 million salary, I just don't see how that would fit, because, I mean, at this point, they have $62 million committed. And if you add in guys that you'd want to keep through arbitration, guys like Lonnie Chisenhall, guys like Brian Shaw, guys like Scott Atchison, if you're going to want to keep those guys for 2015, I think it's probably low to say that they roughly have $72 million committed in salary for next year. So taking on a guy like Alex Rios, I would be really surprised by. I actually would go the flip side in talking about trying to fix this team moving forward. I think there's guys on this team that, probably are worth their salary, but maybe just don't fit in the Indian salary structure in that I'm not sure the Indians can afford $6 million for a guy like David Murphy moving along, and maybe they will take his salary. You basically trade him for nothing. And you brought up Ryan Rayburn. I'm not sure how they're going to get him off the island, but I would certainly try as hard as I could. He doesn't make a lot, but he signed for next year. And, to go with that, in my things that I would do in the next couple months is trying to find roles or find some answers without, truly giving up on 2014 is, for me, a guy like Carlos Carrasco, one of the things that I heard you say on Monday is if John Axford made $500,000, he'd be DFA'd by now. I think you're right, but where I'll disagree with you is he has options. He can go to the minor leagues, and he's an arbitration eligible guy. They're not offering him arbitration. So DFA him. Again, no one's taking his salary. They're committed to this year.
Nobody's eating that money.
so just eat it and be done with them. But, with the exception of the game that Carrasco pitched where like half the bullpen was tired and unavailable, and I think he went like the last 7 outs and got credit for the save, I think that's maybe the only game off the top of my head that I can think of where he's pitched true important innings. I jokingly, said last year that Matt Albers never pitched an inning that mattered. Well, I think Carlos Carrasco would be this year's Matt Albers Award winner, and I don't think he should be. That guy has come a long way in the bullpen, and I think we've all thought that if he doesn't have to go deep into games, he's a different kind of pitcher. And, I would much rather see Carlos Carrasco at this point fail in John Axford's role than continue to watch John Axford fail. And I think that is something that I would want to see in the next 2 months. And I'm not sure that that's not a move that doesn't make you better.
I agree. That was right before I got you on, maybe even a little bit earlier in the show. I don't remember, but I said something like that. I said some of these guys, like mentioning Cabrera and Masterson, and you could throw Axford, a lot of these changes, whether it's a trade out or just moving a guy out of his spot and putting somebody else there, those trades, I said, I dare you to argue with me how they make the Indians worse. And that's why I say you can easily trade a couple of these guys and not be throwing in the towel on this season, because what you bring in may be for the future, but what you're sending out, it's different. If you sent somebody out that contributes this year, okay, then you're taking a step back to go forward. But you're not getting, and you haven't gotten anything out of Masterson. You're getting marginal anything out of Asdrubal, and defensively we know where he is there. Same thing if you mention a guy like Axford. So to me, you may be adding by subtraction by getting rid of those guys. You're definitely not subtracting anything from what you've already got, in my opinion.
Right, and that's where I say, I don't think we're that far apart at all, because, that's where I've said, for the last month, if this group doesn't get it together, you're going to have to think about starting to look ahead and try to, reappropriate a little bit of money. And I think, they're at that point. They certainly haven't got it together. And, I jokingly texted you this morning, and, we can all hold out for the 10-game win streak,
Yeah.
But let's be realistic. There's a reason why we remember it from last year, because it doesn't happen all the time. And through 106 games, this team hasn't really given the indication that they're, about to go on a tear. So I think I'm right there with you, and that's where I say, I'm not interested in blowing anything up, but I think if you look at where they are salary-wise and moving ahead, I don't think there's any possibility at this point that Masterson or Cabrera come back. I agree with you. I think what they have contributed to this season so far is pretty minimal, and adding depth for the future and getting the best of what you can get for them at this point, I think, is the way to go, and open some of those doors. Like I said, I would be done with John Axford. I don't see the point to let him play out the season and then, not offer him arbitration. When a roster move needed to be made, I would make it at his expense. And, I would look in the winter to find anyone willing to take Ryan Rayburn. And, David Murphy's a guy that I would put on that list. You're not going to get anything for those guys that are going to help you, but getting rid of their salary is going to help you enough.
Yeah, I like Murphy, but I'm with you. I know exactly where you're coming from. I mean,
I do too. Too, and I don't mean it really as a knock on him.
No,
I used to say this about the 07-08 Indians, and I said, he's a Casey Blake guy. He's a good player, and he fits on a good team. But when you're on a budget like the Indians, I used to jokingly say the Indians should never have any $6 million players. They should have guys at, incoming salaries at the league minimum, in their first 3 years, or guys that they've committed to for big money. Because
right.
If you are a guy that ends up in the middle, which is, kind of what both of those guys were or are, it makes it tough to make things work. And, to me, I know that David Murphy's not having the best year, but it's his second straight not best year.
Yes.
And he's on the other side of 30. And at this point, again, if you're looking to reappropriate some funds, I think going to 2015, you got to sincerely ask yourself, could a guy like Carlos Moncrief maybe give you a little less average and a little bit more power than what David Murphy's given you?
Yep,
because he's definitely going to do it at less salary.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. And there's a lot of those options in the farm here for next year. That and I said this maybe Monday, but I said, man, there's maybe they're not good enough to do it this year. I don't know, but they're still a good team and they've got a good core. And, the key of coming out of this is to make sure that you're adding to that, because not trying to be the guy to tell you wait till next year. But regardless of how this year, if they win every game or if they lose every game that's left, the next few years they're going to be a good team because they've got the core in place. But they've got to put the right pieces around it to be true contenders. Like, otherwise they'll always be a team that is a hot run away from, making the playoffs or finishing just on the outside looking in. You get kind of stuck there. I mean, here they sit now. That's next year. Here they sit. We've got 50-some games to go, 5 games out. I mean, look at Tampa. I mean, just since you don't want me to say, look at the Indians. 2 months ago, they were the worst team in baseball, and before they're done, they may be the best. And at the rate that they've been going lately, I mean, they've just been red hot. They passed Cleveland actually last night in the wild card. They're a half a game ahead of the Tribe now in the wild card stand. Tribe actually in the last couple of days has added. They've got some contention here now, because all of a sudden Chicago's 5.5 back, Tribe's 5 back, Tampa Bay 4.5, Kansas City's up to 3.5 back, and then you've got Seattle and the Yankees at 2 games back of that last wild card. So now, while the Indians haven't fallen out of it, they're 3-7 in the last 10, and that has allowed a handful of teams to climb back into it with them, which, even if they get their stuff together, we both know makes the journey just a little bit tougher. Yeah,
and we can continue to say, they're just 5 games back, but they were just 2 games back.
You're right.
About 2 weeks ago, and to be fair, I mean, I'm with you. They're not dead. I mean, if you want to hang on to hope and pray for a miracle, then I guess stand pat. But I think that's a bad move personally. And
no, I don't want to stand pat
because they're trending the wrong way.
No, I agree. I do not evoke for the Indians to stand pat. I'm with you on that. I just don't want them to do anything, and I know they won't. See, that's the thing. That's one thing I think you can bank on with this front office is they're not likely to make that stupid trade that you just go, why did they do that? That's the one thing I have faith that I don't think they're going to do.
Yeah, I hear the music coming, and the only thing I would say is, if they were going to make a huge move, if I was going to consider really shaking up the roster in some way, a guy that I would be interested in that supposedly has been rumored to be available would be from Houston, would be Dallas Keuchel, a young left-handed pitcher that they've dangled. And I think that's an Indians-esque move. It's a guy that they can control, and they can control for years. I think the price would be too high when push comes